and it's being done by Zoom technology, which is a first for us, so bear with us. My name is Rick Smith. I'm the chairman of the commission. A bit into the agenda, I'll have the commissioners identify themselves. The host of the webinar is Larry Dunn. He's an alternate zoning commission member, and he's the one that understands this technology better than the rest of us. So anyone speaking should state their names prior to speaking each time. A lot of these are going to be rules lifted out of the governor's directive, which created the opportunity on an emergency basis to do these meetings remotely. But there are some conditions we have to meet. And to aid in a recording and understanding who's saying what, every time you speak, you need to identify yourself. Everybody here? And I have feedback. Okay. The participants in this meeting will be the commission members and staff, persons with applications for architectural design review. Everybody mute their microphone down in the lower left. I don't know if you can hear the feedback, but I can. Okay. Participants, commission members, staff, persons with applications for design review that have previously been submitted for consideration, and also the commission's counsel will be on. At the discretion of the chairman and with the concurrence of the commission, elected alternate members of the commission may participate during old business during discussion of the short-term rental issue. Participants who would like to comment on an item or share a screen item should indicate by using the raise hand icon at the bottom of the screen. And that is in participants, I believe. And I'd be wrong. Larry, where is that?
The raised hand is on the bottom of the, in your chat function, or you click the participant buttons. There should be a.
I don't see it in chat or participants. So we'll figure it out as we go. Oh, I see.
Yeah, if you click the participant button and
mute your own audio up in the upper right corner. And Nip, where is that raise hand?
Go to click the participant button in the lower left-hand corner, and then on the right-hand side, you'll see a list of all the participants. And in the lower right-hand corner of that is the raise hand option. I just raise my hand and lower my hand.
I don't see how you did that. And I'm in the more button.
The host, Rick, doesn't have that.
Oh, okay. That's why.
So the participants do, yeah.
Okay. All right.
I'll just note that I don't have the raised hand. I've been in other Zoom calls and I see that at the bottom. Here, I just have the standard participants chat, share screen, record, reactions. So I have like full control.
Okay. So you're saying you have full control, but you can't do the raise hand icon?
Right.
Huh.
John, if you click on the participant button, you should get a menu on the right-hand side listing all the participants.
Right.
And in the lower right-hand corner of that list is the raise hand button.
Okay, I see that. I thought only the moderator had the mute and unmute power.
This isn't the muting, it's the raising hand.
Okay.
When you click that, the little blue hand, like on Nip's screen in the upper left.
I got it. I see it.
And Art just raised and lowered his hand.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Okay, after I detect that, as you can tell, I'll try and figure out how to actually call on you. But people will speak once called upon, so we can maintain order. Please mute your microphones until called upon. Procedurally, commissioners to offer a motion, physically raise your hand. It'll be easier, as Nip had pointed out, than trying to look for the little blue icon. but that'll be only for the 5 commissioners when we get to motions. The public can participate in the meeting as spectators, and I see many are. That's good. And at the start of the meeting, during the general comments section of the agenda, at which issues not on the agenda can be raised for future commission consideration. During the general comments section, same rule holds true. A member of the public wishing to speak will be asked to raise his or her hand by using that raise hand icon at the bottom of the screen. And if it's not working, wave as wildly as you can in front of your screen and we'll try and notice you and get you on board. Again, identify yourselves before speaking each time you speak. We know who you are, but you still need to do that for anyone who reviews the record. You can also, members of the public, submit comments by writing to the commission after the meeting for consideration on any item discussed tonight. And finally, a recording of tonight's meeting will be posted on the Town of Groton's website within 7 days of the meeting. So if you know someone who didn't sit in, wants to, or you want to listen to it again, you can do it that way. Now we'll move right to the agenda. You're here, so the first half of the agenda you understood because you got in. There is no public, I'm sorry, I'll call us to order. It was 7 o'clock on the button. Should have done that first. And now would the 5 commissioners identify yourselves by naming yourself so the public can know who the commissioners are. Starting to my left, which would be Dana.
Dana Oviatt.
Beth, you're muted.
Beth Steele.
Okay. Blake?
Blake Powell.
Yep, Tanner.
Okay, those and myself, Rick Smith, are the 5 commissioners. We also have one alternate, Larry Dunn, Christine Olson, who is our staff member, and John Casey, who is the commission's counsel. I don't have announcements on this agenda because we normally don't have them, but I do want to make one. Christine has offered her letter of resignation to spend more time doing her real job. And she's been an absolute joy to work with for the last 7 years that I've been involved. And we wish her well, but we will also miss her. And we moved quickly and have a new person that has been employed that will take over for Christine, and she'll be working with Christine for the next couple of weeks to get up to speed. It's Jennifer Johnson. She's near the flag there. Yeah, very patriotic. So she's a resident of Noank and comes very well qualified, and we're very excited to have her start and very appreciative of Christine's service. So thank you both. Next item, we don't have a public hearing scheduled. General comments. Now these are for issues that are not otherwise on the agenda. So if there's an issue that's bothering you or you think we need to be aware of, give a wave or raise that blue icon and we'll get that public comment. I see 3 people who don't have the video enabled. They must just be listening. One of them, though, is an applicant, so I hope we can figure that out so he can.
Very good, Dana Winston.
Good, we have Jeff Schwartz now. Okay, and Holly Geyer, she's an applicant, although Peter, I'm sure, will be speaking for them, but video needs to be enabled. I don't know who Robert Accolini is, whether he's just spectating or whether he's with an applicant. So we'll have to see on that. Okay, applications, I'm sorry, general comments. Did I see hand raising? Again, items not on the agenda. No, I don't. Okay, thank you. Next item is applications. We have 4 tonight. The first one is the application of Peter Springsteel, agent for Arthur and Holly Geyer. I hope I pronounced that properly. For a certificate of design appropriateness to construct a new single-family dwelling at 40 Elm Street South, Noank. Peter. This is the application up on the screen, but let's get Peter's speaker image up so that he can.
So good evening, Peter Springsteel, architect from Mystic, Connecticut. And
Peter,
I'm
before
here
you go
tonight
further, let me try and get you on the screen so people can see the visual as well.
He's there on the right. There should be a panel box on the right with all the speakers there. Peter just waved.
There is, but I only have 6.
One, two,
I have the commission's
there's
note.
a
Yeah,
there's a down arrow there.
I see. I got to spread it. Okay.
Yeah.
There you are. Okay. Okay.
You ready, Rick?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
So again, Peter Springsteel, architect, Mystic, Connecticut. Here tonight representing Art and Holly Geyer. And I think they're observing in the background somewhere here. And the property that we're speaking of tonight is 40 Elm Street South, which is a fairly visible property south of the bridge when you come out of Noank Village. The property right now is vacant. It's a very steep hillside kind of a lot. And we had to go for a variance on this particular piece of property for height. Because of the steep topography there, we had trouble getting in even sort of a modest Cape style building to meet the height restriction. So we did receive that variance, and I think through Christine, we sent in a copy of that approved variance. So you should have that in your package. Rick, if you're
Peter,
controlling what
Larry
we're
down
looking
here.
at, do you want to?
No, Larry is actually.
Yeah, if you
Okay.
tell me what page you want to go to, I can scan
Let's-
down to it.
Sure. Well, we can just go through these consecutively. This particular drawing is the proposed floor plans of the house. And you can see that there is a first floor living area with a master bedroom on the first floor and a kitchen. And then there's a garage to the right of the main structure. That garage is stepped down a bit from the main house because of the topography. And then the other drawing off to the left there is the second floor. There's 2 bedrooms built into the roof line, which you might see in a Cape and Noank all around. So you can go to the next one, Larry.
Might be. I'm trying to figure a better way to get to the one you want, and then
You
I
have
can
a rotate icon. Yeah, there you go.
Oops. let me try that rotate again. All right.
Sure.
There we go. Okay.
Okay, on this drawing, you're seeing the elevation that faces Elm Street. So as you're driving along towards Groton Long Point, this will be on your right-hand side going up the hill. So you can see it's a cape, a modified cape with some dormers in it. And off to the right, you can see the garage that's stepped down a bit. And also on this drawing, you're seeing my height calculations, and we were slightly over the maximum height, which we did get a variance for. So this is the same drawing that was presented to ZBA. And then on the lower drawing here, that's the left side of the house. So if you're staring at the house from the road, that would be on the left side, kind of buried into the hillside there. So you don't really see that much. And you can also see in the upper drawing on the left that there's a retaining wall that we're going to have to build to hold back the grade because it's so steep. And then back behind the house, there's an existing stone retaining wall that I don't know if it was part of an old structure, but it's there and we're utilizing it. You can do the next one, Larry. And then this drawing, the top drawing is the rear of the house, which you really don't see from the road anywhere. And then the bottom drawing is the right-hand side of the building. And there again, you can see the stepping down of the garage in the foreground, and then a driveway sloping off to the left there. And then you can see the retaining wall over on the left side there. The house has dormers. It's going to be shingled, essentially composite trim that'll be painted, double hung windows with simulated divided light dividers in them. So all the kinds of materials and textures you see in Noank right now. This neighborhood is somewhat eclectic. Somewhere in this mix here is the board with all the photos of the neighboring properties. And I don't know if you can get to that, Larry, but on the right-hand side of this house, there are two homes that are part of what was a subdivision. This is the third lot of the subdivision. And those two houses are somewhat contemporary, modern looking, although they have some more traditional materials they've used to soften them. So you can see, let's see. The one on the 20 Elm Street South there, that's more of a contemporary building, although part of it has a gable roof. It's kind of an eclectic mix of different styles all in that one house. Then at 25 Westview, which is to the left of our property, is a very contemporary architect designed house. And then going further down Elm Street South, I think that's 36 there. 36 is a more traditional kind of cape building, which is more in the vein of what we're doing. And then some of the other houses in the neighborhood are more traditional as well. Some are not so traditional. So there's a mix. And 20 Elm Street South, yeah, that's the one I mentioned. And then there's 30 Elm Street South is another one to the right of our property, which is also much more contemporary in feel. But what we're proposing here is more in keeping with the Cape styles that you'll see in Noank Village and surrounding areas. I think, Larry, there's another drawing that has a 3D color drawing attached.
Let me look. This one?
Yeah, it's not in color here, but yeah, that's the one.
Okay, let me rotate that.
So in this drawing, we have the site plan over on the left, and you can see South Elm Street down at the bottom of that site plan drawing. And then there's a curb cut, and that curb cut serves the proposed property and the two existing subdivision properties. So we'll be spurring off that curb cut. And then you can see the topography lines in there. At the bottom, you're at elevation 20. At the top of this lot, you're at 46. So we have a 26-foot elevation change. And you know, we chose the Cape style to try to keep the height down, because as you look up that hill, the house perception of the house is that it's bigger than it really is because of the hill. And in fact, the house behind us is three and a half stories. It just looms over this property. So we should be well within the context of that without any trouble. Our driveway has the maximum pitch on it to get to where we need it to be for the garage. And then we stepped up to the house. So it's a tight, challenging site, but I think the owner's chosen a style that will work nicely in the neighborhood. We've got a deck on the front with a picket style railing. And again, you can see in 3D the different double hung window types that we have. And we have more of a picture window with a transom, arch transom in the front. some carriage house type garage doors, because you will see those from the street. And then the garage is supported by a retaining wall, as is the driveway on the far right. So that's pretty much the story. There's not a lot of context other than height and scale for this neighborhood. And I think we're well within those parameters within the zoning regulations for design review. Be happy to answer any other questions you might have.
Okay, thank you. Rick Smith, asking the commissioners for questions. Beth?
I don't know if I'm muted or not. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but you have to identify yourself.
Sorry, Beth Steele. I just had a question. Peter, maybe if you could speak to the dormers that are on this particular building. I noticed that one's a shed dormer and the other one's just a traditional dormer. And if you could explain why that was chosen and how I guess it relates to the rhythm of solids to voids in the facade.
Well, we could have chosen to run a dormer across the whole facade. But in doing that, I think we felt that that was just too monolithic feeling. So introducing the gable dormer on the one side, we felt helped to break up the massing rather than having a big solid mass up there. So that's the reason for that.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions, commissioners? Okay, seeing none. Is there a motion to deal with this? Is it you, Beth?
Okay. I move to determine, based upon the potential impact on neighborhood architectural harmony and character, property values, historical integrity, and/or public health and safety, the level of review deemed appropriate for this application is a site plan review under section 2.26.6.5, and to both waive all specific submittal requirements that are not included in this application because they would not aid the commission in its determination of the application's compliance with section 2.26, and to accept the application as complete. Excuse me. And to approve the application of Peter J. Springsteel, Architect LLC, for a certificate of design appropriateness to, I guess, build a new single-family dwelling with two-bay attached garage at 40 Elm Street South in Noank, because it meets the criteria set forth in section 2.26 of the zoning ordinances for the Noank Fire District.
And to be clear, in that motion, that is Peter Springsteel, agent for Arthur and Holly Geyer, Geyer. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Is there a second? Blake seconds it. Blake, Paul. Okay, motion on the floor made and seconded. It's a proper motion. Is there discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none. For votes, commissioners, please raise your hands so we don't electronically try and figure out which button to push.
Can we kill the drawing?
I'm sorry, say
Can
again.
we
Nick?
kill the drawing?
I couldn't hear that.
Can you kill the drawing so we can see each other?
Oh, yeah, Larry, could you close that now? Thank you.
All right, just as an item, if you go up on the speaker view and you hit the gallery view, all of the pictures show up on the block on the right. Just expand it out. You can see everybody at the same time while the screen is being shared.
Thank you.
Good. Okay, thanks both. Okay, all those in favor, this is the 5 commissioners, raise your hand. Okay, I see that 4-0. I'm abstaining, as is my right as chairman. So it's 4-0 to 1 abstention vote, so the application is approved. So Peter, you're off the clock and you're off and running. So good luck.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time, members.
Okay,
Thanks,
take care.
Peter.
Thank you.
Second application of Sun Power Systems for a certificate of design appropriateness to install roof-mounted solar panels at 112 Elm Street, Noank. The application is Jeff Schwartz.
Good evening.
There you go, down in the lower center. Okay, you're on, and there's the application.
Okay.
So Jeff, go ahead.
Okay. Well, this is a roof-mounted solar system. Pretty straightforward. 3 mounting planes. If you go to the page PVA 1, it's just the next page, and you can see the plot plan and where the modules are designed. Let's see. The balance of the system, meaning the AC disconnect, the meter, and all the equipment is, if you look at the top of the page, that's actually the eastern wall. That's where the equipment is mounted. There are a series of photos that show the property from the front and the sides. Where the equipment is mounted is the view is blocked from the road by some trees and shrubs. The next page in shows the elevations. The front elevation view is if you were standing on Main Street looking at the house. Back elevation, the home actually butts up against some water. So that would be actually sort of standing on edge of the shore, looking at the back of the home. All our modules the frame is black. The racking is called Invisimount, so it's not seen from, it's kind of tucked underneath the modules, so you don't really see the racking at all. And the way we do our installs, and particularly in this area, is the conduit runs are exterior. However, we do paint to match either the roofing or the siding. The conduit runs are also discussed with the homeowner before actually installing, just as a point of clarity, so there's no confusion as to how the conduit's going to be run. It's pretty straightforward. I don't know if you have any specific questions for me, but there is a second set of photos in the packs that you received. The first being views of the home, the second 200-foot radius, the different from the different properties surrounding the home, and those are all notated on a map. The photo, the way we took them, they're numbered, so you can look at the GIS map and determine exactly where in the neighborhood we are looking from. So those are there for you to see as well. If you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, questions for Jeff?
Sure.
I see no hands and no icons. The 3 things I heard that are the things we always look for in solar is the power boxes are blocked from view from the street, and the conduit is matched color-wise to the roof and the siding. So those are all pluses. And I have no other comment or question other than that, to make that observation. So is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay, you need to read the long, because it's a design review. The thing that I emailed you yesterday?
I didn't print it out.
Okay. Somebody else? Beth gonna do it? Okay.
I'll do it. I move to determine that based on the potential impact on neighborhood architectural harmony and character, property values, historical integrity, and/or public health and safety, the level of review deemed appropriate for this application is a site plan review under section 2.26.6.5, and to both waive all specific submittal requirements that are not included in this application because they would not aid the commission in its determination of the application's compliance with section 2.26, and to accept the application as complete and to approve the application of SunPower Systems on behalf of owner of record Mary Hotchkiss for a certificate of design appropriateness to install a PU system roof mounted solar panel installation at 112 Elm Street, Noank, Connecticut, because it meets the criteria set forth in section 2.26 of the zoning ordinances for the Noank Fire District.
Motion made. Is there a second? Is there a second to the motion? Dana? Dana Oviatt seconds. So it's a proper motion. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none. All those in favor, wave your hand. 2, 3, 4. 4-0. I'm abstaining, so the motion passes. Jeff, you're good to go. You need to somehow get your permit from Bill Mulholland. He has his Tuesday night hours, as you know. So thank you. Application number 3. Oh, you're the other SunPower. Okay. Application of SunPower Systems for a certificate of design appropriateness to install roof-mounted solar panels at 68 Main Street, Noank. And Jeff, you're still on.
Okay, thank you. Again, there's nothing different about this installation. Same criteria as far as the conduit. It's a single mounting plane, western facing. We've provided photos, again, both of the home looking at it from the front and sides, including surrounding properties. So you can take a look at those if you need to. The next, let's see, third page in shows the elevation views. So you can see what that mounting plane looks like from the west, and the equipment, the AC disconnect, the meter, and so forth is on the eastern facing wall, which is also obscured by shrubbery or tree possibly. I have to look back at the photo to see exactly what is there, but it is obscured from view with the vegetation. Same equipment is being installed on this home, the racking system and the disconnects. If you have any questions specific to this project, I'd be happy to answer them for you.
Okay, would you, Rick Smith from the commission, how about the conduit on the roof and on the siding?
Oh yeah, same. We'll do the conduit run over the ridge of the east-west facing roof, and that will bring us right down to the equipment. And again, that discussion, exactly where the run occurs, the electrician will discuss that with the homeowner. However, the principle is the same. We'll paint to match the roof for the siding, whichever makes the most sense to help the aesthetic value of the project.
Okay. All right, commissioners, questions? I see no hands. Is there a motion? Dana or Blake, you're not going to help Beth out? Okay, Beth.
Okay. I move to determine that based on potential impact on neighborhood architectural harmony and character, property values, historical integrity, and/or public health and safety, the level of review deemed appropriate for this application is a site plan review under section 2.26.6.5, and to both waive all specific submittal requirements that are not included in this application because they would not aid the commission in its determination of the application's compliance with section 2.26, and to accept the application as complete, and to approve the application of Jeff Schwartz, SunPower Corp. On behalf of owner of record Dane Liston for a certificate of design appropriateness to install solar panels on property located at 68 Main Street, Noank, Connecticut, because it meets the criteria set forth in section 2.26 of the zoning ordinances for the Noank Fire District.
The motion made. Is there a second? Blake, second. Blake Powell. Okay, it's a proper motion. Discussion on the motion? Seeing none. All those in favor, raise your hand. 4-0 to 1 abstention. So the motion passes. So Jeff, you got both. So we're all set with yours. The fourth one is application of David Blacker for.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Jeff. Good luck. Application of David Blacker for a certificate of design appropriateness to rebuild an existing shed at 45 Main Street. And as I understand it, Dave is about to be on in the firehouse. Is that correct? Okay. Oh, there he is. Okay, gotcha. Okay, Dave, go ahead and explain what your application is all about. Oh, he's muted.
Can you turn yours around?
I just, I unmuted him, but
Oh, okay. All right. How's that?
Yeah,
Can you?
that's better. And we can see that too. Good.
My name is David. My wife, Mary Beth, and I own the property at 45 Main Street. We would like to replace an existing shed in the backyard, which is in poor condition. We would like to rebuild it to look as similar to the original shed that's there at the moment as possible. We have pictures of a shed that we built for another property that we would like to copy that shed using the same type of materials, the same placement of door and windows, similar siding and roofing and hardware, similar to the original. And we'd like to place it on the existing granite block foundation of the shed that is currently there, but in poor condition.
Okay. All right, commissioners, you saw your, you had packages in the office that had pictures of the new and old, and actually Larry's got them up now. And there were the pictures of the surrounding property, which included the surrounding Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. The application, Larry's going through the pictures now, so that's what I was going to get at. All right, are there questions for Dave? This is a replacement in kind, it looks like. In other words, no change in the footprint, no addition to height or anything. So questions, commissioners? Nip?
I notice we don't have a site plan showing where this building is going to be on the property?
It's gonna, Dave Blacker. It's gonna replace, it's on one of the property maps that I got from the town GIS dated July 8th, 2019. It's at the far back, let's see, it'd be on the north border of the property. There's an existing shed right there that we planned, or we had hoped to duplicate.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Yeah. Beth.
Make it if no one else is going to make it.
Yeah, I see you're laboring there.
I move that to determine, based on the potential impact on neighborhood architectural harmony and character of property values, historical integrity, and/or public health and safety, the level of review deemed appropriate for this application is a site plan review under section 2.26.6.5, and to both waive all specific submittal requirements that are not included in this application because they would not aid the commission in its determination of the application's compliance with section 2.26, and to accept the application as complete, and to approve the application of Dave Blacker for a certificate of design appropriateness to rebuild the shed, existing shed like for like at 51 Main Street, Noank, because it meets the criteria set forth in section 2.26 of the zoning ordinances for the Noank Fire District.
Just a correction on that, it's 45 Main Street property.
Oh, I apologize. I was looking, yeah, 45.
Okay. Motion made. Is there a second? Dana? Dana Oviatt, seconds. Discussion on the motion. Yep.
After we approved the application up on Prospect Hill a few meetings back, we said that we were going to get more rigorous in the application of our regulations. This one is, pretty minor in the scheme of things, but I don't think our regulations differentiate between minor and major. But if you compare the amount of information that we have in this application in terms of what the new building is going to look like, it's dramatically less than, for example, the application that we looked at in the first agenda application item. So I just like to raise that point and ask the commission members to consider whether in approving this one as a minor application with pretty limited information about what the new building is going to look like, if we're setting a precedent, which may come back to create issues for us in the future. I'd like to at least like to hear other commission members comment on that.
Okay. Other commissioners? Dana?
Dana Oviatt. Nip, as you say, this is really straightforward. He's provided not only pictures of the old shed, but what he wants to replace it with, a dummy that would replace it. And I'm just wondering what would you have him do that would make this absolutely picture perfect complete for you?
Well, I would say picture perfect, but at least the package that I have, there's one photograph of the new building, from an angle. It's as I noted, compared to what we usually C for an application for a new building. It's de minimis.
Arthur Blake. Okay, I have a view. I see what Nip is getting at, and I agree with him. And we did agree after Prospect Brook Street to, in Nip's words, be more rigorous. 3 reasons I think this one wouldn't be the one I would go after to begin to conform better with what we think the rules actually require us to do. It's a shed that's like for like, as opposed to a house that may be different. To me, that mitigates the need for some of the extra information that we might ask of another applicant. And it's not moved in the location. So not only does the new one look like the old one did nicer, but same in size, same in siding, same in height, same location in the yard, and it's a shed, not a principal structure, a small shed. Those things don't mean that the applicant gets a pass, but I think it gives us the latitude to say we don't need as much detail and as much site plans and architectural drawings as we would if it was a brand new structure on a vacant lot, which would be a change from what's there now. Just my opinion reflecting on what Nip asked, because it's a good question. And it's just maybe this isn't the application to look for every possible thing that we might want in an application that was maybe a house or a new structure. So just my 2 cents for it.
Before they do anything else, I would like this.
Any other commissioners comment? Okay, seeing none.
Could I speak? My name's Dave Blacker.
Dave, yeah, you're the applicant. You can speak.
Okay, so when we initially turned in or applied for the application, I used the photographs of a building that we had. It was under construction. It was something that I had hoped, this was before coronavirus set in, I had hoped to put the building on a trailer, bring it to a meeting, and let people walk around and take the measurements. I have 2 photographs here, which Christine can hold up, which show both sides. This would be the west side and the north side. This is the east side and the south side. There's only two photographs, but it shows the 4 different sides of the building, top to bottom. It includes the door, the hardware, the windows, the trim, the pitch of the roof, the wooden clapboards. This is a building that we built for another property. We planned on using it to get our approval to replace that shed, which it's an exact duplicate of the shed that's in the yard. And if there's any question, and I actually, before I get approval, I would like to put it on, since there is a question about a lack of information, I would put it on a trailer and let anybody inspect it inside and out.
Well, if the motion fails, then that's an option. But if the motion passes, I think that would be an indication that people didn't require that. But man, I got to tell you, that's about the best alternative to architectural drawings I've ever seen, is put it on a flatbed and drive it past you. Nip.
Well, I'm willing to do that. It was because of the circumstances of the situation that we're in.
Yeah.
That it wasn't to disguise any.
Right. We understand that. Yeah. Nip.
Dave, thank you for that information. I'm impressed with the extent to which you're willing to go to educate us. At this point, I'm comfortable. I raised the issue more out of a matter of procedure and process for us internally than any reservations I had about what you were doing. But as I indicated, I think it's very important for us when we deviate from the letter of our regulations that we talk about what we're doing and why we're doing it. Rick, I appreciated your thoughts on why you were comfortable. Makes sense to me. But I don't think we should just blindly deviate or silently deviate from our regulations without talking about what we're doing and why we're doing it. But Dave, thank you again.
Good point. And I agree with you. Okay. On the motion, all those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, 4-0, 1 abstention, so it passes. So Dave, you can see Bill Mulholland during his hours and get your permit for it. So you're good to go.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next item on the agenda, reports and minutes. If we can dispense with them relatively quickly, we'll more or less be on target with John for 8 o'clock. Christine had distributed minutes of the January 21st meeting, and let me do this. There we go. And the monthly reports, ZEO reports for January, February, and March. Does anyone have any questions? Bill's not on. He had to go, didn't he? I think he was there for applicants, but I think he's gone now. Does anybody have any discussion points on any one of the 3 ZEO reports? Okay. Seeing none, I'm going to use my standard language and hope you agree that without objection, and I see none, we'll consider those 3 reports approved. I see no objection, so they are approved. The draft minutes of January 21st. Does anybody have any comment or question on those? Okay. There's Blake. Okay. No comments or questions from anyone. So with that, who's that? I'm having a hard time getting everybody in the right place here. There we go. There. Okay, without objection, then we'll consider those minutes approved. And I see no objection, so they're approved. Okay. Next item on the agenda is old business discussion with Attorney John Casey regarding commissioners' questions on short-term rental issues. For the audience, of which I see 4 people, I'll explain just a minute. Everybody knows we're engaged in trying to figure out how to regulate short-term rentals to the satisfaction of most people in Noank. Commissioners raised a number of questions between January and the end of February, and we put them together in a package, sent them to John, and he's here tonight to give us answers to those questions. That's one thing I probably didn't give you to put up there today, Larry. So John, when you get to them, would you read the question briefly so we all get the reminder and the audience can see what the question was before you get into the description of your response to it? So you're on.
Okay. Good evening. For the record, Attorney John Casey of Robinson and Cole. Let's see. So there's a number of questions, and I'll sort of start by saying sometimes there's no easy answer to questions about regulating short-term rentals. It's obviously an issue that perplexes and challenges communities all over the country. I have the benefit of working in a firm that has looked at this from all different aspects, especially one of my partners in Boston. So I relied on him in reviewing these. So there's no, I think I spoke to Rick, you could write a book about this. So I did my homework. It was a little while ago because this was supposed to happen in February. So, and I refreshed my recollection leading up to tonight. But again, for the members of the commission, just let me know if you have follow-up questions. So I'll read the question because there's some people that aren't on video. I see that Larry's shared an email. So the first one, if Groton adopts a town-wide ordinance on short-term rentals, is Noank bound by the decision, even if Noank decides to adopt a zoning ordinance on short-term rentals? Can Noank do something more or less restrictive than the town? So Noank has its own zoning powers. So you can pass an amendment to your zoning regulations that under those powers that control the use of land within the fire district. A townwide ordinance that how should I say that crosses over and infringes on the district's zoning powers could be seen as an overreach. And there are examples where the town has issued townwide ordinances, but then exempted, for example, Groton Long Point, where they don't have authority over one of the subdivisions in town, one of the political subdivisions. So I would say that an ordinance by the town and a zoning regulation by the fire district can coexist peacefully. But your regulation as to zoning will apply. And if there's overlap or inconsistencies, I think you'd want to be aware that as the town, as you're both going forward, so that the town doesn't inadvertently, as I said, infringe upon your zoning powers. I will pause to take questions if anyone has one.
Any questions of John? And I should have said before, we have two very active alternate zoning elected alternate members. And in the matter of short-term rental discussions, they have been included in the group of people who can deliberate, debate with us. They can't offer votes on final decisions, but so for this part of the agenda, the 5 commissioners and the 2 alternates would be Lynn Marshall at the bottom and Larry down at the upper left-hand corner. If you have questions or comments in this debate, feel free. Everyone else is a spectator. Having said that, any questions for John on that first question? Dana?
Dana Oviatt. John, is this your opinion, or has this been, does this have a precedent in other towns in Connecticut that you can quote us on?
There was a case with, I forget the town, and it was a town and a fire district, and the town tried to overreach and take away some fire protection services from the fire district, and it went to court, and the court said you can't do that. You know, if a political subdivision has powers, you can't infringe upon those powers.
Yeah, can I ask another question?
Yes.
So it was my understanding that that Groton zoning decided not to pursue short-term rental regulation and kicked the ball into Groton Town Council. And I was there when Groton Town Council heard testimony from various people in favor of short-term regulation. And I believe the attorney, either in public or afterwards, specifically said that if Groton Town Council designed an ordinance, it would definitely override. It was his opinion that it would definitely override any ordinance that Noank zoning would put forth. So maybe I'm just repeating a rumor, but if you could respond to that, I'd appreciate it.
It would, I mean, it would depend on the breadth of the ordinance. It's hard to say exactly. So, you know, if the town council passed an ordinance of sort of general applicability concerning some aspect of short-term rentals that didn't impinge on your zoning power, say for example, the fire district wanted to make them legal in every possible way, and the town wanted to impose limitations on them. If it was from a zoning point of view, you had made that decision. I mean, I can't say who would win if we went to, you know, I think you would win if we go to court, but I'm just saying if there's like a direct, inconsistency between the two legislative acts and neither side back down, that's something that the courts would have to decide. I think from a political point of view, if, you know, these things don't happen in a vacuum. If you pass an amendment to your zoning regs, the town needs to take that into consideration if they try to regulate in a different manner. And they can easily exempt the fire district from whatever regulation or any ordinance that they propose. And the fact that, you know, there's no right way to regulate short-term rentals. I mean, the two primary ways are through zoning or through a municipal ordinance. You can do it either way. Neither one is preferred or has a better track record. They both, you know, they've both been used.
Larry, before I get to you, I see your hand, but Dana, you had your icon up, and I wonder if you want to follow this thread of conversation before I go to others. Or you took your icon down, so you're covered. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you. Larry, before we get to your comment, could you check that waiting room? I got a text from someone that said they were trying desperately to get in and couldn't. And I went in. Lynn was one of them. I got her in, and Foster Nichols is there. I don't know if he can hear us, and we don't have a screen image of, so he doesn't have his video on. But I want to make sure people can observe as much as possible.
I don't see any, I'm in the participants, I don't see anybody in the waiting room.
Okay, then they're both in, and hopefully Mr. Nichols can hear what we're doing.
Yes, I see him in the session. He's muted but does not have video. That's
I can hear you, thanks.
okay.
Oh, good. Okay, he can hear. We're good then.
Okay.
All right. Now, Larry.
Larry, I don't know if you need to keep up the email. You know, to me, it's taking up the whole screen, and my preference would be to see the participants. So,
Okay. But as I said, I'll take it down. You can get the same view of participants off on the side as a separate.
no, I only see about a third of the participants when you share.
Hit the speaker view, right? And you'll get gallery view.
Mhm.
Hit gallery view, and it'll
no.
show the same thing. Anyway,
Yeah, no, I have it in gallery view, but when you share your screen, only like 5 people show up.
You can stretch the box.
Yeah, and you have to drag the whole thing over in the middle, which puts it on top of the
Okay,
documents.
I took it
I'm
down.
moving them back and forth myself.
I
So,
took it down. Okay, so my comments are, number one is that the town, because of the coronavirus, has temporarily suspended their investigation of short-term rental, number one. Number two is there was a clear understanding that there are multiple jurisdictions within the town, and wanted to include and consider all the various, Groton, Long Point, as well as Noank in their deliberations. So I think that it's, I don't see that as a matter of practicality. I think there's an interest from my read of the town working to make sure that everybody's input is there. Number three, I think from our consideration, some of the items that we would require the town to support, like town police. If you wanted to pass something that required enforcement, and then you go to town and say, gee, I want you to do this, they kind of go, well, that, if our ordinance don't line up, they may or may not be willing to do that. I don't know the structure on that, John. Maybe there's something you could say in that. But I think there's a number of things to consider that says the best solution is that, we have alignment, as much as possible. So, those were my comments.
okay.
So if the town proposes an ordinance that is a townwide jurisdiction, and the fire district decides that that's a preferable means of regulation, you don't have to do anything more. You can just allow the town ordinance to control the issue.
Mhm.
It might be a matter of the chicken and the egg, who gets there first.
Understood. Other comments or questions of John on this first question? Okay, let's go to number 2 then.
Has there been legislation or judgment in Connecticut in the last 2 years about short-term rentals? Short answer is no. The only legislation that passed that concerns short-term rentals, and I think the commission is aware of it, is just the hotel tax provision that allows, or I should say requires the rental platforms to collect the short-term rent tax from operators.
Hey, John, in addition, during the coronavirus, is that the state has said no short-term rentals during this period of time. So they did override the local decision-making bodies as part of an emergency order.
Yeah, I wasn't talking about the emergency orders.
Okay, all right.
Okay, other questions on question 2? Blake?
Yeah, John, this is Blake Powell. So just to clarify what you're saying that there's no other town in the state that has enacted ordinance similar to what Groton is considering?
No, I'm not saying that. I understood the question. Has there been a court judgment regarding short-term rentals or any overarching state legislation that controls them? And there's no overarching state legislation, and there's been no case law decisions regarding short-term rentals. The city of Hartford has passed short-term rental regulations.
Okay, other questions on this question number 2? Okay, seeing none, I'm sorry, I'm not obeying my own rule. Rick Smith. Okay, question number 3, John?
That is, can Noank legally limit the number of permits with a waiting list? And then the commentary is, other states do this, can we do it here? This is one of those questions that doesn't have an easy answer. You can do it, whether you'll face a claim of equal protection, that may be. And it goes the same. I think there's a question lower down, or maybe buried in there somewhere, about requiring people be owners for 3 years or a year or some sort of situation like that. Whenever you place some sort of requirement on a land use permit, you will potentially run the risk that someone will make an equal protection claim.
Questions on this one, on number 3? Okay, seeing Dana?
Yeah, I'm not sure the waiting list addresses the question exactly to what my interest was. My interest was I went through and identified several towns in the US that had set a cap of, let's say, 20% of houses or 50 houses or 100 houses in a certain community, and then let those people have the right to a short-term rental and everybody else no. So I'm not sure it was a waiting list that we were after. I think it was, can you cap off the total number of short-term rentals that you allocate in your community by specifying a number or a certain percentage?
And you're correct. That's been tried, that's in other communities. What you need to look to, just like any kind of governmental action, is, what are you trying to protect? What's the interest that the action is trying to protect? So if there's caps or distance requirements, there's some communities have said, you have to have 200 feet between them, so you don't turn a neighborhood into a series of rental houses. You have to identify, you have to have a reasonable basis for imposing the restriction. So you have to identify the problem, and the governmental action has to address that problem.
Okay. Other questions on this number 3? Rick Smith. Seeing, was that a hand, Larry, or no? No. Okay. Okay, number 4.
That's along the same lines. Is it legal in Connecticut to implement a regulation that states you must have owned a house for 3 years before obtaining a permit and being authorized to do short-term rentals? It's the same analysis. What are you trying, what impact to the community are you trying to prevent? Are you trying to, what's the governmental interest, and how does the regulation promote that government interest?
Good. Okay. Questions on that one?
Lynn has her hand up.
Lynn? Yeah, Lynn, you didn't hear the introduction. You're muted still now.
Yeah,
Okay, now we're hearing you. Okay.
All right.
Yeah, we're not using the icon that much. People are waving their hands. They find it a little easier.
So, John, does that also then apply to any restrictions, such as you can rent for so many days per year or so many rentals per year? Any of those types of restrictions? Does the same logic apply?
I think in general that you want to approach any type of governmental regulation that you're addressing an issue.
Yeah.
So you want to have a rational relationship, a rational basis for the regulation.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't quote my constitutional law 101. Maybe Beth can help me, but it's the type of it's the type of regulation will determine the level of constitutional review. So I think this is probably just rational basis, but I wouldn't swear to my constitutional law professor on that one.
Okay. Questions on this one? Okay, seeing none. Number 5.
is it legal to have different tiers of ownership as a basis for different regulations? Again, that raises the same sort of equal protection due process questions. If you once you start putting people in boxes, oh, you're a full-time resident, you can do it. You're a part-time resident, you can't, you will, you may never not, but it depends on if someone wants to challenge that type of regulation. You have to at least have a rational basis for why a full-time resident, can do something, but a part-time resident couldn't.
I hear you saying that your rationale for what you do in these kinds of regulations where it appears that people may be treated differently instead of uses being treated differently. We just have a much higher bar to find a reason that justifies those kind of regulations. Is that fair?
I think that's fair. You just want to treat everyone the same. So for example, if you decide that you only allow short-term rentals if there's an on-site owner, then no one's being treated differently. That's just the rule you have, on-site owners only, because that addresses, say if the concern is that with absentee owners, the renters are more likely to cause a nuisance. And that's a sort of a generic across the board requirement that's not unusual in the communities. Different communities have only allowed on-site owner-occupied short-term rentals.
Okay, questions on this one? Lynn?
Yes, so in terms of just thinking of it, not in terms of necessarily what's good regulation or what's good for Noank, but just in terms of propensity toward litigate or being open to litigation. So if we said no short-term rentals, then that would not be open to litigation. On-site owners would not be, but any of these other nuances where some people can or some people can't, or the restrictions, and that you might argue whether the rationale for those restrictions was good enough or not, those would be more open to challenge. Is that correct?
Yes, I would agree with that.
Okay.
And different courts have come out different ways, even on just the question. It depends, it doesn't necessarily depend on how it's been proposed. A lot of short-term rental restrictions are through condominium association homo rules, in large condo developments across the country. And they've been challenged, as limiting the property owner's right to make a reasonable use of their home. And different courts have come out different ways just on the question of, because usually the prohibition is you can't have a commercial use. It's a residential development, it's supposed to be for residential uses, and some courts have found that, that a short-term rental is a commercial use, and they've looked at different factors like, are you paying a hotel tax? Are you advertising? Is it more akin to a hotel than a house or an apartment? And some courts have said, yeah, it's a commercial use. It's prohibited, under these condo docs or under these zoning regs. Whereas other courts have found that no, the person's just in a structure that's meant for residential living. They're just there for a shorter period of time. And we all pay taxes. So the fact that they have to pay these taxes doesn't change the nature of the use from residential to commercial. So that's the that's the nub of the issue. So but if you were to or any community or municipality that's regulating these, it's usually, you want to have a finding that you find that short-term rental use, if you're going to regulate it as a commercial use, that it's more commercial than residential.
Okay, questions on this one? Rick Smith, number 5. Seeing none. Number 6.
This was a question regarding how to keep working on this problem or this issue. And maybe, so the question was, could the commission create subcommittees and work on pieces of this issue outside of the monthly regular meetings of the zoning commission? And so the Freedom of Information Law and Open Meetings Law provides that any subcommittee of an agency or commission like this is subject to FOIA. So even if you created a subcommittee, and we were focusing at first on this idea of if you have less than a quorum of the commission members together, it's not a public meeting. And that's true, but if you create an official subcommittee, even if you just put one person, if it was a subcommittee of one, it's a subcommittee of the commission, it's subject to FOIA. If it's one member, an alternate member, and 2 members of the community, that's still a subcommittee of the commission, subject to FOIA, needs to, give notice of its meetings, allow the public to come to the meeting, follow all the FOIA rules. So, and that's all the spirit of FOIA, to keep things open. They don't want commissions creating these small subcommittees with less than a quorum and then doing work that's not subject to FOIA and open meeting law, and then showing up at the once a month regular meeting and have all of your decisions made, and and the public not being able to view sort of how the sausage is made, so to speak. Yes.
Larry?
So because the whole point was, how do we progress this? So it
Larry
sounds like,
Dunn.
what's that?
It's Larry Dunn.
Larry Dunn, I'm sorry. So the whole point was, how do we progress this? So it sounds like that we could hold with the right announcement, hold a special meeting outside of the normal monthly cycle dedicated to short-term rentals, focus on that, the public meeting, that would be okay.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
If you have any kind of public meeting, special meeting, obviously the rules are a little different for noticing those, and they're even more different nowadays. But you can have a special purpose special meeting, a one topic special meeting, hold it as a workshop. And to be clear, and I think we discussed this a little bit, typically, the idea of a public agency, public meeting is the public gets to watch you make the sausage and watch you work in public, so they see what you're doing. But for most public agencies, at most public meetings, there's really not an opportunity to speak on each agenda topic, as tonight's meeting showed. So the public only has an absolute right to speak at public hearings. So if you wanted to hold a special meeting, it could just be a special meeting of the commission where you talk amongst yourself and the people get to watch, or you could notice it as a workshop where you would invite public comment. And my advice would be that if you want public comment, you be specific in the notice of that meeting, so people know that they're welcome to come and comment. Because it's frustrating if you show up at a meeting and you spent time on this as a member of the public on anything, and you're told at the beginning of the meeting that you can sit and watch, but you can't participate. You can't.
And Rick Smith, we've done this a few times, so it's good to have the reminder that there are at least 3 ways to to conduct our business.
Right.
Regular meeting, a special meeting, no public input, and a workshop with public input. So,
The workshop is a special meeting.
right.
You know, that's under the rubric of freedom of information. So, and of course, again, if you go forward with an application that the commission submits itself to amend its regulations, as an amendment to your regulations, you're required to hold a public hearing on that,
Mhm.
and you'll get public input there. But, you know, you guys have been very thoughtful about this, so I know you want to, you know, keep the public as involved as possible as you go forward.
Okay. And for the record, that was John Casey for those
Sorry,
who
yes.
hear it on audio. And I'm Rick Smith for those who hear it on audio. Questions on that one? Seeing none. Number 7. These
So number 7 is, what is the legal basis for short-term rentals being defined as a rental of less than 30 days duration? So there's nothing in a statute that says that, but just that's what's developed in this sort of area of law. 30 days or less being a short-term rental. Any good real estate transaction lawyer would probably tell you, you know, you want to, I mean, I rent a house for a week to go on vacation, and I'm sure like most of you, and I have a lease for a week. So as you get into 30 days, you're definitely going to want a lease. So as you put more effort into it, it becomes more of a, you know, a standard tenant landlord situation, where something shorter, 30 days or less, it's just sort of evolved into short-term rental.
Okay. Questions on that one, number 7? Is that you, Nip, or no? No, okay, I thought I saw your hand
I
move.
keep myself awake.
Oh, okay.
Thanks.
Oh, Christine, yeah. Christine, did you, I saw the yellow Rick Smith, the yellow bar came up. No. Okay, no questions on that. Number 8.
What is the legal basis for the statement that, quote, zoning ordinance are permissive? If it's not specified as allowed, it's prohibited. And then there's a commentary said, I know that's our interpretation of our ordinance based on the language contained therein. Is this sentiment also expressed in state law, or is it the prevailing view in other communities based on their ordinances? Has that issue been tested in court? So most zoning ordinances are permissive, and I can pull up yours so I can quote chapter and verse. Sorry. There it is. It's the one thing I didn't pull up. So it's in section 2.1. It's entitled Compliance with Regulations. It says, quote, no land, building, or premises or part thereof shall hereafter be used, and no building or part thereof or any other structure shall be constructed, reconstructed, extended, enlarged, moved, or altered except in conformity with these regulations. So that type of language, which is standard in most, I mean, if not all municipalities, zoning regs in one form or another, basically conveys the provision that If it's not specifically allowed, it's prohibited. And that's standard in zoning, and it's so universal. I can't even tell you what case said that that's okay in Connecticut. I mean, you can go back to a very old United States Supreme Court case from Ohio, Euclid case that first allowed zoning. But that's just the way it's always been. So if it's not specifically permitted, it's prohibited. And in the draft I did last year, that's why I was very specific in the language to say that, because people know that short-term rentals are going on, and you want to avoid a situation where if you just prohibit them, say, today going forward, or you just allow them from today going forward, people would make the argument that they're all grandfathered in. But if you make it very clear that your regulations never allowed for them, and that they're only regulated through this use or through whatever permitting structure you set up, the ability to claim a right to a non-conforming use would go away, or at least be much more difficult to claim.
Okay.
And your regs are unique in that you actually have a whole provision about requesting a certificate of nonconformity. So people who can prove that they've been renting a cottage since 1911, and they've been doing it continuously since then, can request that type of certification.
Okay.
And 1911 is much earlier than your zoning regulations came into effect, but I'm just throwing that out there as a date. If they've done something since before the regulations were first enacted, or since a regulation was amended to make something that was initially legal now illegal, then that's a pre-existing non-conforming use that can continue.
Right. Okay, Dana?
Dana Oviatt. I'm not trying to complicate the situation by giving you a hypothetical, but suppose a community, suppose in a community, short-term rentals were allowed to go on for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years. And then the zoning commission enacted an ordinance, not an ordinance, but a zoning law which prohibited them from doing what they had been doing. Could they just simply argue that the zoning commission had been permitting them tacitly kind of all along?
The concept is municipal estoppel, or should the municipality be estopped from enforcing against the use if they allowed it in the past? And the standard for that under Connecticut zoning law is pretty high. You basically have to show that the municipality encouraged or encouraged the use, or there was some act by a municipal officer that said it was fine and you could do it. And it's just a very hard standard to meet. So the fact that something goes on in a town, and I could think of like 3 in Groton now I'm working on outside of Noank, but just because something's going on and a zoning official sort of turned a blind eye to it doesn't mean it's legal. So while the zoning statutes provide that a town has to enforce against a structure within 3 years, if you know that someone built a garage in the setback, you have 3 years to enforce against that type of violation. If you don't, then life has to go on. But there's no similar statute of limitations, for lack of a better term, on uses. So if someone had set up, someone was running a bar in their basement and it's been going on for 10 years, and you can enforce against that. There's no limitation on enforcing against an illegal use of land.
Beth, did you have your hand up? No? Questions on this one? Lynn?
Yeah, so that was my understanding from what, Lynn Marshall, from what you had said last year, that was my understanding, but then I was a little confused, and Larry's more involved in this than I have been. But when we went to the Groton Town Council meeting, it seemed as though their attorney had been ruling differently, and I don't know, it was because their zoning regulations are different, but
Yeah, I can't speak. I had a short conversation with Jonathan Reiner.
Yeah.
And for the record, this is John Casey. And they're struggling with it like a lot of towns are. But, you know, my advice to you has been and will be that there's no provision for short-term rentals. And if you consider them, now you can interpret your zoning regulations to mean that residential uses include short-term rentals, but that's a matter of policy and interpretation of regulations. Because I've actually, there's people who would argue, like I said, there's courts that have decided that, you know, a short-term rental is just a different form of residential use. If someone in Noank can rent their house out for a year, and that's okay. If they can do it for 6 months, that's okay. 2 months, that's okay. You know, why? What are you trying to protect when you start putting limits and regulations and requirements on short-term rentals? So that goes back to the point I started with in terms of why you want to identify the problem and have a rational basis for your regulation of it.
Okay, questions on this one? Okay, seeing none. Number 9, we don't really need to belabor because the commission, John and I had talked about that one in passing, and commissioners and alternates have all gotten an answer to that one. And that's why our 2 alternates are participating tonight. They can be seated for purpose of discussion and debate. So we don't need to belabor that one. That concludes the written questions. Does anybody have anything that's come up that arose during this conversation or since we sent these questions out, since we have John here?
And Rick, I'll just clarify on the use of alternates, as I said. So every town has a different means and methods of engaging their alternates. So, but the only hard and fast rule is when you have an application that you're dealing with, when it comes time to say close the public hearing or close the applicant's presentation and vote, that at that point, you know, the alternates who could have participated in the open debate about the application or participated in the public hearing. Once the public hearing's closed and you've seated the 5 members that are going to act, then the alternate doesn't or should not participate in any deliberations at that point forward.
Okay. Is that clear to everybody? Okay.
And that's why it's good to, you know, state on the record who, you know, the 5 regular members are acting on this application, or, you know, Beth has recused herself, so I'm seating Lynn to, you know, act on this application, and it's very clear who you're naming.
Okay. Lynn?
so,
That's Lynn Marshall.
Marshall, yeah, John, so then is it so that once a motion is on the floor, the alternate should not speak? Is that?
Actually, yeah, well, even prior to that, once you go into deliberations.
Okay.
So very bright line on public hearings. Once the public hearing is closed, which is the end of all public input, then really the alternate is just a member of the public at that point. So they have no greater right to participate or try to influence the decision than anyone else.
Then if the alternates are participating in the crafting of short-term regulations, and those are being discussed and voted on, which kind of limits to have, or do the alternates vote on that, or again?
Well, at that point, when you're working on it, you're a little different than everyone else. So like, Peter and his clients are off, but like, so when you're acting like this, you're just an applicant. You're an applicant putting together an application to amend your regulations. So you can, say Rick as the chairman can ask you, Lynn, as a alternate for input. Rick could ask his neighbor who has no role on the commission at all. He could, if his brother-in-law was a city planner in Las Vegas, he could ask him. He could get all different types of input to put the application together. So, and that's just like any other applicant. You're getting information and input from different sources. But then once the application is filed, then it's a formal application and it has to be acted upon like any other application.
I have a question. I'm intrigued by this, to know where the break point is. Rick Smith. I would think that before the public hearing started would be the place you wouldn't want the alternates to be involved. And what I think I heard you say is they could sit with us and hear public comment during the public hearing process, but when we close the hearing, they go back to the audience. They have no further rights and privileges any more than another citizen. But doesn't it look like you're bending the process a little bit by having alternates sit with members during the public hearing process?
That's why I said different towns do it differently. So some towns would never have an alternate sit with the commission at all unless they had a role that particular night. And if they had a role in one application, they would come up for that application, they would do their work, and then they would leave. So, but other towns have the alternates up there for the whole time. What the case law says is the bright line is at the end of the public hearing. So,
Okay, good, thank you. Other questions? Dana?
you're on mute.
You're muted, Dana.
You can't read my lips. So if I want to we'll go back to question number one for clarification quickly. So if Groton Town Council adopts an ordinance on short-term rentals, and if Noank zoning designs something that is more restrictive, what happens then?
I guess it depends on how litigious some property owners are, but you could enforce your regulation. You can enforce that. And if someone chose not to comply and you went through the enforcement process up through and eventually, in the worst situation, taking someone to court to get them to comply, then I assume that the issue of jurisdiction would come up at that point.
So if we're Rick Smith, if we're comfortable with what we've done in any kind of a regulation, forge ahead with it. And if it gets taken to court, that's what judges are for.
Yes. And you have to remember that happened with your architectural review regs.
Mm-hmm.
And they were upheld in court.
Yeah. Okay.
Followed by a settlement, but upheld in court that you had the power to have those.
Yep. Okay. That concludes the questions, and it's
Lynn has a question.
who? I'm sorry. Oh, Lynn. Yep. Lynn Marshall.
So, being such a small, the fire district is small, and court expenses can be great. And can we put in the regulations that, well, just starting out with, can we say that so that the cost of administering and enforcing these regulations will be borne by the applicants without putting an actual fee in, if it's this much or this much, but that you figure out what it costs in terms of monitoring or what everything we need to do, and that will be borne by the people who actually have the licenses. I'm sorry, I said applicants, by the licenses. Can that language be used? Is the first question. And then secondly, litigation, it doesn't take much of it to really dig a hole for the Noank Fire District. Can that also be specified as being covered? So if you've got a lawsuit or two, no, okay, well, it falls in your court.
So again, John Casey, for the record. Yeah, so the municipality, you'll just have to bear your own costs of litigation. It's part of, municipal budget. As to you can set, and I think there was proposed to be set a permit fee, and those, different towns have different fees, so you can set them to an amount you think that's appropriate to. It can't cover the cost of like Bill's entire salary. You could try, but reasonable for the use that you're proposing. There's some fees I don't think they would apply here, where for large projects, like in the city of Groton, the electric boat had to pay for complete engineering review by the town. The statutes allow municipalities to bill those kind of fees, to bill those to applicants, because they require such technical review that they don't expect the town to have that in-house expertise. So there are certain fees like that you could possibly pass on to an applicant. Whether it be possible here, I'm not sure, because this would be, at least the way the original proposal was written, it was a little more basic sort of zoning official review. So
Then there are, and how about fees for not following the regulations? I see that in many short-term rental regulations, that there's a daily fee for every thing. For example, a daily fee if you don't have a license and you're renting a short-term rental, and after so many days, and it goes up and up. And
yeah, that's you should have you should have a enforcement section with your violations. That's built into, I could check it, but I know you have.
It's legal for a zoning commission to do that, is what you're saying.
Right, to have fines, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for violations, of course.
That was Rick Smith and then John Casey. Okay. Doing my chairmanly duties, I'm watching the clock, and I know people have other things to do in the morning. So unless there's something else on questions, I would like to conclude this part and talk about a couple of other things in other business to try and expedite them for tonight. Because we have an issue on new business. It won't take a long time, but it might take a little bit. So with no objection, let me move on in the agenda. And thank you, John, very much.
Thank
Okay,
you.
I'm gonna sign off then. Okay.
Bye, John.
Bye,
Right.
everyone.
Discussion of correspondence received from from commissioners since the January meeting. You remember, I basically stepped on my leash in late January and caused a little bit of a firestorm, and we finally settled it all out. But in the meantime, that plus a couple of canceled meetings, there was some correspondence which cropped up, and people wanted to attach to the agenda for a future meeting, and it became a kind of a roly-poly thing. And the more I looked at it, I realized we weren't going to talk about those things tonight anyway. But actually, Nip and I had agreed that this wasn't the right meeting. It would be jam-packed with everything else. What I would suggest is if we deal with item C the way I think we're going to, because I think most people agree with that, we keep all of those things in mind and talk about them as one of the early orders of business at a larger meeting that is short-term rental specific. And not so much that this correspondence from February 10th is something that anybody wants to talk about, but the ideas contained in anybody's correspondence ought to be the kinds of things we talk about going forward, not tonight, but at meetings where we get back into really working on short-term rentals. So if there's no objection with that, that was how that subject ended up on the agenda. And I would like to hold it for further discussion once we have a larger meeting on short-term rental only. Is there disagreement with that approach? Okay, seeing none, let's do that. Item C is the NIP actually was the first one I could find that had that idea, and I think it's a good one that we talk about. Instead of trying to do our business an hour once a month after we've dealt with applications and all the other business, just have a meeting or two that are good sized in terms of length of time, like a Saturday from 11 to 4 or 1 to 5 or something. Under the unique circumstances we're finding ourselves in, we'd have to do it by remote technology for a while, but I don't think that makes it insurmountable. It just makes it a little more complicated. You know, I would propose a Saturday meeting, 4 or 5 hours by Zoom, unless by the time we get to it, meeting time is opened up again and we can go face to face. And that's how I wanted to introduce the subject, but then really see what everybody else felt. And on this, I would include Lynn and Larry as part of the debate if there's no objection from the principal counselors. Nip.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. My preference would be to start with a special meeting. My perception is at this point that, you know, we've all thought a lot about it. We've had a lot of discussions. I think we probably have enough enough input, each of us, to get together and make some progress. I very much would prefer that it be done face to face. I do not see it as urgent that we leap into the process at this point. Conceivably on May 20th, the governor will relax the current restrictions. And if we could, if he says you can go from 5 in a meeting to 10 in a meeting, it would accommodate us. And I just think it will be much more productive to get from where we are today to some kind of a consensus if we can do it together. And again, there's an executive order prohibiting short-term rentals except for special inhabitants. My own guess is this summer, the tourist situation in this area is going to be dramatically different than what it was last summer. So I don't see, and as John Casey said, if the number of illegal short-term rentals exploded this summer, which I consider highly unlikely, it doesn't restrict our ability to regulate them in the future. So I would much prefer to do it in a way where we can be the most productive.
Okay, others? Rick Smith, others? Dana?
Dana Oviatt. First of all, I completely agree with Nip. I think it ought to be done face to face. There's no rush for getting this done in any way that I can think of. And I think for Joe Q public to be able to follow this very, very critical deliberation of us for this important an issue, I think that we owe it to the public to hold meetings that they're used to rather than having them get on Zoom. I know of at least one person who is not following the meeting tonight because he can't get on Zoom. So that's my first comment. My second comment is I'm willing to meet for 4 or 5 hours, but we got to agree upon a plan because I don't know what we're going to do for 4 or 5 hours except do the same thing that we've done for the last 3 or 4 months. And I don't mean it to sound, it's just I need a suggestion of a plan of how we're going to go about a meeting for 4 or 5 hours before I commit to it.
Okay, let me try and weigh in on that. You all remember in March, I sent around a strategy document, how to get back into this and move the ball forward. And I said I had prepared what I had called a working draft at the time, and there was some discussion about whether it's legal to submit something like that to the commission. And I checked with John, and in fact it is. And I think I emailed everybody about that process question. My approach would be to get that document out. I polled everyone, the 5 commissioners, and 3 wanted to see this as what's legally called a working draft, a public draft, not for public distribution. And legally under the Freedom of Information Act, you can do that as long as the commission agrees they would like to see it. And all it really means is the commission treats it like a staff draft. You get it emailed to you, you read it, you come to a meeting and decide then whether you want to pursue it further. If you decide not to pursue it, it's dead. If you decide you do want to pursue it, then it becomes a public document available to anyone who's interested in seeing it. But the way John explained it to me, we don't have really a staff that does that sort of thing. Like Groton has people who just do their planning and zoning. And it's very common for larger municipalities to have a staff prepare a document that is collects all ideas, send it out to the commissioners, they comment on it, send those comments back, and it's all what's called in camera. It's, outside the public view because it's a staff working draft that gets developed with ideas that when the commission is comfortable with it, then it becomes the public document to be talked about and further massaged before you ever get to a public hearing process. So I had suggested in March that we do that between the March meeting and the April meeting, tonight's meeting. Obviously, we had the meeting in March postponed. We have this one now that's Zoom. My intent, having had the other 2 commissioners and myself in a majority, I'm going to send that out in the next couple of days for people to look at as a preview copy. It won't be a public document, but the commissioners and the 2 alternates would review it, and then that might be the basis for the plan Dana's talking about, because I think the plan needs to be what approach do we use to focus our attention to try and start making decisions, not to make them as much as have a document that has all the kinds of things in it that we're going to want to debate and discuss and finally pass judgment on. And believe me, it's not an attempt for me to try and guide the outcome. Everything in this document, if it got changed by a majority vote, I'd be happy with. If people took things out by, a majority decision, put things in, I think that's great. I just think it's important that we have something to talk about now instead of nothing, because we could run the risk of having a 4-hour meeting that we just talk in generalities and have some good ideas, but then they kind of get lost because there's no place to put them. So that's my vision of the document approach. And Nip I see Nip's hand and I don't see anybody else yet. So Nip. Yeah.
Somewhere in the last couple of months, Lynn Marshall shared a thought that I believe originated with one of the consulting outfits that provides assistance to companies to municipalities to draft their short-term regulations, rental regulations, and to monitor them. And as I recall, their recommendation was that you start with identification of your goals to very specifically state what you're trying to accomplish by regulating short-term rentals. And then after you do that, you can proceed to consider the various aspects of regulations that you might consider, the options, and evaluate them relative to your goals. And as I thought about that, what occurred to me is in our discussions up till now, we have not had agreement on what we're trying to accomplish. And as a result, when we debate each of the options, we have a tug of war going on because we each have, I think, our own set of goals, but they're not stated. And so I think our first step in the process from this point forward needs to be a discussion and agreement on the goals so that all our work going forward from then can be based on that and not have the hidden agendas, multiple agendas of individual goals that may or may not be in conflict with each other.
Okay. Rick Smith. I agree with you that we need a goal in there. And in this straw man document, I've already told Lynn, I put in the one she had proposed 3 or 4 or 5 months ago. It's a kind of a straw man, if you will. I thought it was quite good. Other people want to may want to change things, which, as I've already said, I think is fine. But I do agree with you. It was one of the things that has been missing. And my approach would be to have that in a document, and you can see how a whole decision document would lay out, and it would include a goal and objectives that came forth from Lynn's submission, to have something to chew on and to decide if this is how you want to approach it. If you want to change the goal, that's great. I mean, I know Lynn doesn't have a pride of authorship with what she wrote, and I certainly don't. It's to get people to focus on something instead of just discussions. Yep.
Yeah, I think we should start with a blank sheet of paper when we're talking about goals. The fact that Lynn put hers out and you put them into a document, that creates more standing than they deserve at this point in the process.
Okay, I don't want to do battle over it. I actually don't agree with that, but I'm kind of looking for 5 other people to join the debate. Larry? You're muted, Larry.
Right, yeah, okay.
Larry Dunn.
Like 2 years ago, I provided a document which essentially had objectives, parking and noise, et cetera. So I think each of us in our own way has kind of put something, down for, what I would consider objectives. So I think as part of that session, that the first part, would be to revalidate or recertify the objectives that we've kind of danced around for 2 years. So I think, I understand, your point on the standing, but I don't think that there's really, we'll find out there's not that much of a difference because we've been talking about this for over 2 years. And I think the ones we came up with were very similar to the ones that, I threw out there at the beginning of this whole thing, right? That big matrix I put together. So I would say that, that if the objectives are part of that session and part of that distribution, it allows us to comment on them, throw it in there, and then have a discussion on that. We've started with a blank sheet of paper, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 times. And we kind of keep recycling back. So it's, I'm all one for making progress of some sort. So that's I've said enough. I'll put myself back on mute.
Lynn?
I just made notes on all this as we've gone along, and for the May 20th date that things will open up, we don't know that. As Dr. Fauci says, we do what the data tell us, or we should be doing what the data tell us. So we have no idea. And then the opening up, it's to happen in stages. And, it may be that elderly people who are the most susceptible aren't going to be part of the first openings. So it could be a commission then of Beth and Blake. They could do the whole thing. So, and if it's only a meeting of 10 people, say, well, that wouldn't allow the public to be there at those meetings. So they'd have to be Zoomed anyway, and then we'd have a whole group of us trying to Zoom in, and that would be even more complicated. It'd be nice for us to be able to be face-to-face, but I don't know how that would work. If we have a meeting that's from 4 to 5 hours, particularly if it ends up being on Zoom, I would suggest that we do 2 hours, a 1 hour break, and then 2 hours rather than having 4 or 5 hours straight. I think we'll all get a little idiotic if we try to go at that long without a break.
Okay.
For a document versus goals. Well, starting with goals, what I put out, that was not my set of goals. It was just a draft based on what had come off the whiteboard. I was trying to put it into more goal-like language instead of just a few words. And also, I may have inserted some things that I thought were being discussed kind of that maybe didn't end up on the whiteboard. I added a little bit extra in, but that wasn't my set of goals. I would add more to it. So, and as far as the document versus the goals, I mean, I've been hearing about this document. I'd like to see it. But I think, John really, from his answers, it just enforced to me how important those goals are as being the basis for everything we do. So I don't think we should start out with a blank sheet yet. I'm fine for taking anything that's written down. And I mean, I can be quite liberal with a red pen and adding, and we have to figure out the process by which we can digest what other people are saying before we make decisions on it. So I'm all for getting this done as quickly as possible. I think having the goals very clear to everyone so that they're the basis for any discussion, and that the goals have really been thought out, and people really thinking about, when I'm saying this, which goal am I addressing? Do I really believe in those goals? And what are the things I've been saying in these meetings? Are those really covered? You know, and I say we should be able to have a whole lot of those. What goal is that addressing? Is that one of our listed goals? You know, we can go with every single thing we say, and does it tie back to a goal? So I don't think we necessarily have all our goals up there in the way we should. I'm perfectly happy with having the document out there, but I would think that we really need to spend time on the goals, as you know, starting with what's in the document's fine with me, but really knowing that we've got to really get that nailed down really well and be very thoughtful about it, and then move on to the document. I'm fine with that. Well, after we see if we like the document or not. If we agree with not like if we agree with it, if we think that's a good starting place, which is what you've said you wanted to do. So I think that might work.
Okay. Others? Rick Smith, others? Blake?
Or Blake Powell. So I completely agree about establishing a consensus on what we think the goals are of these regulations. I've been kind of asking that right from the beginning. What is it we're really trying to achieve? But along with that, too, is we should have a consensus on what the whole approach of these proposed regulations are. And by that, I mean, I really heard two extremes during the public hearings from the public. One was keep everything we do as simple as possible. And then the other was people want a lot of detail and a lot of fine definition of what is going to be allowable and not allowable. And those two sides don't necessarily have to have different goals. The goals, they could completely agree on the goals. It's just really the approach that we want to take and how restrictive and we want to be. And I think we need to do that as well. Because then from there, it'll be a lot easier to identify what specifically needs to be in these regulations and to what level of detail. But I also agree that trying to do it on a Zoom format like this is just not going to be nearly as effective as doing it face-to-face in person. We'd have to be, really, really well structured in order to pull off a 4-hour meeting on Zoom over an issue that's still very undefined like this.
Beth?
I wrote down from what I heard, I kind of have an agreement on different points with everyone. I think we can do it in a Zoom meeting. I like this format actually, because I do get to see everyone. And I think it also prevents people from talking over other people. Everybody gets an opportunity to say something. And we go back around the horn. I like Lynn's idea with the 2-hour breaks in between. So I'm thinking we could have a Zoom meeting, 2 hours, take the break, come back. I like Nip's idea about the goals. I think we can do that. Start out that Zoom meeting with identifying the goals. And I also would agree with Lynn. I would like to see the document. So circulate the document beforehand. We can still start off identifying our goals, whether that document after we identify our goals helps us move forward or not is to be seen, but I still want to include the document in the mix. I want to see it, and hopefully that moves us in some direction once we do identify the goals.
Okay. Rick Smith, I want to weigh in a little on the Zoom thing too. I mean, it is new and it has its shortcomings, as Dana and Nip have pointed out, but I think it will grow with it in time, and I hope we'll pursue it. It's a technology that is going to keep us from having to wait a while and before we get back into this in earnest. And one of the things I think is a pitfall in this time. Just because people aren't going to be doing a lot of short-term renting this summer doesn't mean this issue is going to go away. We had some momentum. It's waned a little bit. I'm trying, the way I'm proposing, to rebuild our momentum and get going on it. And one of the best times to develop ideas and thoughts and approaches is when you can just look at each other and you're not preoccupied with a whole lot of other things going on. And whether we do that in a face-to-face or in a Zoom meeting, if we're all focused on this, I don't see any reason why we should wait until things relax and renting becomes more likely and public personal meetings, face-to-face meetings become more likely. I don't think that those things should keep us from trying to make progress on this. I agree with Beth that there are some advantages to this process, this Zoom process, that are better than a face-to-face meeting. And there are others that are shortcomings. And the biggest one is to make sure the public gets to watch properly. If not watch, listen. But I think, we can make that happen if we work on it a little bit. And I just am an advocate of trying to maintain and rebuild our momentum on this, because we know that eventually this is going to become a bigger problem. Noank is going to change a little bit more than it is now. And part of the reason a lot of us got into this debate a year and a half ago was seeing what was happening in Noank and being uncomfortable with it. So unless that mindset has changed, I think we need to maintain our progress. So saying that, I heard 3 commissioners say they didn't like the idea of doing this via Zoom, and I'm hoping I can persuade one to continue to give it a try. I mean, if we try it and it doesn't work well, so be it. But I wouldn't want to not keep at it and wait till, could be months, frankly, before we have a face-to-face meeting again. So having said that, I'm angling for a change in position of someone. Okay, I don't see one, so we will not pursue Zoom meetings.
Who are the 3 who are opposed?
I saw Blake, Dana, and Nip that did not want to pursue Zoom.
Well, I think it's the worst of the 2 choices. I'm not saying it's going to be impossible. I just don't think it's as effective as doing this face-to-face.
Well, I agree with that. But does that mean that you'd be willing to give it a try?
I'd be willing to give it a try.
Okay. Well, that makes a difference. So then let's talk about a date. I mean, if I get this document out in the next couple of days, is May 2nd too soon for people? It gives you a little more than a week to look at a 10-page document that has a lot of white space around paragraphs, and it's large font. So it's not a long read.
I guess I have one question, because I would like to see this be really thoughtful. So let's say that you had, I guess the first decision would be after we've read it to see whether it's something that we wanted to go with or not, or if we're just going to start on goals. Is it goal focused? I'm not quite sure what the meeting, what the agenda, what we were doing.
Actually, I saw 3 things happening at this so-called large meeting.
Yeah.
Rick Smith. First was to talk about the various things in the correspondences over the last 4 months that people might want to talk about. I could take half hour to an hour. I hope we don't dwell too long on old documents and instead dwell on the ideas going forward. I mean, but I don't want to just keep people from talking about something that they have expressed an interest in talking about. The second item was goals, frankly, because I have already bought into the notion that ought to be one of the first things we start to focus on. But before we get to that, I wanted to have a meeting of people to decide, yes, I want to pursue this working draft, or no, I don't. Because if the decision is no, I don't, then I know I can throw it on the scrap heap, and then we'll simply say, well, okay, then commission, how do you want to proceed? And I'm open to suggestions. So it would be part of that next big meeting, but probably not a very long part of it. Having said that, let's say the decision is to proceed with it or not to proceed with it. Then the next subject would be goals. And then what kind of strategies do you need to pursue to meet those goals? Now, maybe we don't get all of that done in one meeting. I'd be stunned if we did, but those are the things that I think ought to be on the agenda. Correspondence issues, working draft document to pursue or not to pursue, goals, and then what kind of strategies meet the goals.
Yeah, on the goals, one thing I think if it could be helpful if people could, like, so we have a straw man for goals, and then if people could comment on those before the meeting, so people have time to mull it over a bit before it gets, those would then get presented at the meeting. And instead of these emails that come in, I don't know, I get these emails that come in at different times, and then I've got to gather them together and compare. If we could just send them to Jen and she could compile them and get them out to everybody in one document at the same time, it would make it easier for us to see it. Make sure we got.
I need a recap on that. Rick Smith, are you saying on goals alone, we should have everybody submit what they think a goal ought to look like before we go to the meeting? I'm just trying to look for clarity.
Yeah, if we're going to be discussing it at the meeting and we've got those draft goals, then I think our comments on the draft goals, we could say those are good enough, we don't need anything more. Or we could say, I think we need some more. Or I think it said, you know, the things that I have been saying and Nip so well described our own personal goals we may be working with. So if I see that there's some that I'm working with, those should be stated. And all of us should say, if we have other goals that we're trying, that we are internally, you know, using when we say what we say, that those should be apparent. And if they were put in, and if we our comments or whatever, or our own set of goals, or however we decided each to address it, if those were put into one document, so then we have it all there in one place, we've looked at it ahead of time, rather than trying to just read it on a Zoom document or something. I think that's awfully hard to do. And that's part of the, you know, being organized for the meeting, that it takes more organization, I think Blake said. So if we could have that done so that we could all have thought about it and be organized and get through it, I think that might be helpful. And then you get a chance ahead of time as the chair to see what people are saying and how you want to organize it to get through the meeting, again, in a Zoom meeting.
Yeah. Okay, so in the call for this, well, I'll call it a Saturday meeting or a special meeting. I'll put in that everyone should send in their goals so that to the staff, so that whether it's Christine or Jen, I'm not sure because it depends on the transition date, but to make sure that everybody else gets copies of those sent to them so that they all know what everybody else is thinking about goals, and we come to the meeting prepared with those instead of coming in and not having given us the benefit of what everybody wants to see on paper or would like to see. Is that right? Fair?
And so that everybody's thought about it. And if they want to just say, you know, that they're fine with what's in that draft and they want to just pull those out as their goals, that's fine too. But if they, yeah.
Okay. Others? Okay. Let's talk about a date. If this document gets out in the next day or two and you're all, you see in the call for the meeting that the goal discussion that we just had gives you about a week and a little bit more for Saturday, May 2nd. My question is that too ambitious or is that sufficient to read a fairly short document and give some thought of your own to the kinds of goals you'd like to see us meet? Beth?
That's fine with me, as long as it's over by 4, because I have another conference call on that date that's already scheduled for 4 o'clock.
Okay. Anybody else? Dana? Okay. All right. Anybody else? Larry's good with it. Actually, I need everybody to nod because if somebody can't make it, then we start to think about it. Jen and Christine both said yes. Lynn?
Rick, how much time are you suggesting we set aside for this meeting?
Well, the model I heard was meet for a couple hours, take a break, meet for a couple more hours. Now, whether we need to break for an hour in between, it's, if you can't go home, what are you going to do for an hour? So maybe the break is 20 or 30 minutes. I understand what Lynn was getting at is your mind can get weary after 3 hours of talking about anything. So
We're 2.5 hours into this. I think we're already there.
yeah. Amen. Nip?
Don't count on me for 4 hours on May 2nd. That's
Okay.
too much for me.
Okay. Can we count on you for the first couple?
Probably.
Okay, that's good. All right. It's not indentured servitude. If anybody has to leave, that'll be okay. It's like our meetings. If somebody has 3 votes to adjourn, doesn't matter what I think, we're going to adjourn. So same thing would hold true. I just like the idea of not limiting ourselves to an hour here or an hour there. I don't think at the stage we're at now moving forward, it's not really productive. And maybe we end up after 2 hours and we say, hey, we did everything we can reasonably accomplish today, so let's end early. There's nothing wrong with that either. So, okay. I didn't see Blake. Is that okay with you?
Sure.
Saturday, May 2nd? Okay. Okay. Is there, we do have more other business. Anything else on this short-term rental process that we're building?
I
Yeah.
just want to know what time on May 2nd you were at it.
You guys, you want to start at 10 and take a break around lunch?
Yes.
It's fine.
So let's say, 10 to 4. So with a half-hour break in there, then Beth gets on a little, maybe we end a little before 4 so she can get home.
10 to 4 is 6 hours. I thought we talked about.
Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry.
I mean, that's too much.
Let's say 10
10 to 12.
to 2:30 with a half-hour break.
Can we have a discussion about whether it needs to be this much in one meeting? This
Well,
is-
I'm trying to make sure we don't end up shorting ourselves. If we all decide we've had enough and we want to go early, we can go early. But if we didn't start out by saying, let's block out a fair amount of time instead of what we've done forever, which is an hour here, and then a month later we do another hour, and I just don't think that's a way to proceed effectively.
I don't think anybody was proposing that we do an hour here and a month later we do another hour. When I made the original proposal, what I suggested was 2 special meetings, and I would think in a total of 4 hours, 2 hours in each meeting. As long as we focus and we don't get into these lengthy side discussions, we could make some real progress in 2 2-hour blocks. I think if we go into it and say, well, okay, we've got 4.5 hours today, that doesn't create a sense of urgency to get something done. But if everybody wants to
Time
do it,
out so we can have it if we need it. And
well, we're going to need more than 2 hours. I'm
I
not.
agree. We'll need more than one meeting. I agree with that.
And as I think Blake pointed out, Yeah, we're now 2.5 hours into this. And I don't know about the rest of you. I'm burned out. I'm tired of listening to everything that we've been listening to tonight. I'd like a break, not 20 minutes. That's probably my age. So you young folks, you decide what you're going to do.
Okay. Well, others? I've already expressed my view. I don't want to belabor it. Dana?
What Nip is saying is it's better to lift 10-pound weights 20 times than to lift 50-pound weights once. I agree with him.
Mm-hmm. So for this first one, do you want to make it, say, 2.5 hours, 10 to 12:30, and we break at 12:30 and everybody goes home? I mean, I'm favor blocking the larger amount of time out than less, and then ending if we're tired. But I'll go with the will of the majority.
I think just a couple of hours is perfectly sufficient, but to have a couple of hours just dedicated on this one issue and followed up, whether it's a week later or 2 weeks later, it doesn't have to be a whole month though, on the same issue, is going to be more effective than trying to cram it all in one long full day session.
Okay.
I'm going to agree with everyone else. 2.5, it seems
Block it out for
amount of time.
2.5 hours,
Yeah.
10 to 12:30.
Yeah.
Okay.
It does give people time to mull over between meetings and say, is there anything else you think we're leaving out or not comfortable with, and can move on more comfortably. Particularly, I'm thinking we don't really know how long that discussion of those emails would take. So, you know, would we be able to adequately address goals after that? I don't know. So
Well,
10 to
that's
12.
an argument in favor of blocking out a larger amount of time and ending when we want to, as opposed to coming up short and wishing we had some more time. I mean, there's a
I think 10 to 12:30 would be good.
okay.
And with follow-up meetings that aren't so far apart.
Yeah.
Or either, I'm okay too with like a 10 to 12 one, and then a 1 to 2:30 or 3. But if some people can't focus for that long, then that's a little non-productive. So I guess my preference then would go toward 10 to 12:30.
Okay. Well, let's do that then. And believe me, I don't think we're going to get everything we want to get done in one meeting anyway, whether it was 10 hours or 2 hours. So we will need to be talking about next steps, but I think we can do that at the time. We've run way over what we normally do. We have one other real item of business, but it's very short. It's under new business. It's a discussion on, oh, I'm sorry, there are 2 items. Nip, would you be willing to defer that solar installation talk? That was your agenda item.
I think that's very quick.
Okay.
I make a motion that we authorize Bill Mulholland, our zoning enforcement officer, to make the decisions on the solar applications. As long as they're as cut and dried as most of the ones we've seen, I see no reason why Bill couldn't act on them. If it's for some reason he thinks it's more complicated, he can bounce it to us. But I don't think there's any good is served by us continually spending time on the kinds of applications we saw tonight. So my motion is that we authorize Bill Mulholland to act on, approve straightforward solar panel installation applications.
I would second it.
Okay. Motion's made and seconded. Debate on the motion? I have something I'd like to offer. About 6 months ago, I went to him and asked him how we could do this very thing. And his answer was, we would have to amend our ordinance. There's a section that specifies what he can do without bringing it to us. And that's not one of the things in there. I don't mind passing the motion, and maybe we get a different answer this time, maybe not. But that was the answer I got the last time I asked him. So I understand the sentiment and I agree with it. I don't think by a motion we can just have him do it from now on. His answer was you'd have to go through and change this section in the book, which would mean an ordinance amendment. That's becomes a kind of a matter of business. We'll have to have a hearing on it, things like that. But
That's fine, if that's what it takes.
Yeah.
You know, Nick Tanner, in architectural design review, we have authorized him to act on, one level of application. So, I mean, if there's something else in the regs that prevents us from handing this off to him without amending the regulations, that's fine. I don't mind, going through those hurdles. The question is, do we want to go in that direction? That's the whole point of this motion
I don't think
tonight.
you get any argument with that. I doubt there's anybody that doesn't think that it would be better to have him just approve these with the conditions we talked about with those two applications today. So I'm with you on that.
So is there a
Okay,
second?
motion made and seconded. A comment more? Oh, okay. All those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, 4-0 to 1 abstention.
I have a question. Why are you standing on everything tonight?
Chairmen often abstain when it doesn't matter on a vote. They usually vote to break ties or to tie something that they oppose. As I was reading Robert's rules, I saw that and I said, yeah, I'll give it a try. I mean, we're only 5 people. I'll probably next meeting go back to just voting because it is artificial and it raises the question. But that's what I read. Go ahead. Yep.
I've been on a variety of commissions and boards over the years. I've never seen that be the standard practice for the chairman. And I think it probably raises more questions in the minds of the observers about why is he abstaining? Do you not like this?
Well, like I just said, Rick Smith,
What's the
that's
problem?
probably why I'm going to go back. I tried it this time just to see. I'll probably go back to just voting in the future.
Yeah, but Rick is correct. It is in Larry Dunn. It is in Robert's Rules of Order to do that. So, and you go last, by the way, at least.
Larry, as I said, this is Nip Tanner again. I've been on lots of boards and commissions, and I have not seen that adhered to. And it's the exception rather than the rule.
Okay.
Okay, last item of business is, wait a minute, make sure I have this unanimous, or 4-0 to 1 on solar, the bill. Last item of business is application review for Ram Island Yacht Club. They just want to pave the parking lot. My understanding is it requires no discussion on our part. We simply have to list it here, and I still don't know why, to be presented at the zoning meeting to be held on May 26, 2020. I think it was all group emails, so you may be aware that Blake and Dana and Nip, all for different reasons, are recusing themselves on this one, which means Larry and Lynn, one or both of you will be called on for that meeting so that we have a quorum, because we're losing 3 of 5 commissioners to the recusal rule. But beyond that, I don't think there's anything else that needs to be discussed tonight. So if anyone has anything else to add, feel free. Otherwise, a motion to adjourn. And before we adjourn, I would like to give a special thanks to Larry for the effort he put in on this whole Zoom thing. He made it work for us, which I do appreciate very much. That was a big assistance. So, Beth, motion to adjourn, I see.
Yes, and before that, I just wanted to say to Christine, thanks for everything. We're going to miss you.
Amen. Yep.
And with that, a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Second, all those in favor? Don't anybody oppose this one. All right, thank you all. Sorry it went 2 hours and 40 minutes, but it was productive. So we're adjourned.
Stop recording.